On our wedding night, I had just stepped out of the shower, wearing nothing but a silk slip dress. Water droplets rolled from my hair and landed on my collarbone, spreading a damp chill. Meanwhile, my new husband, Lucian, dressed in a plain white silk robe, sat cross-legged on a floor cushion by the window farthest from the bedroom. Holding a scripture scroll, he looked as cold and emotionless as a jade statue. He didn't even glance back at me, breaking the silence in the room only with a voice that seemed laced with ice. "Nina, though I have returned to secular life, I need tranquility. For the next year, we shall sleep in separate rooms." I leaned against the bathroom doorframe, letting the cool air envelop my warm skin. Hearing his words, I curved my red lips into a smile, like a fox that had gotten its way. "Fine." I stepped onto the soft carpet, walking toward him step by step. The rich aroma of rose-scented body wash in the air engaged in a silent invasion and confrontation with the bitter sandalwood fragrance lingering on him. I stopped before him, bending down to meet his gaze at eye level. "I respect your faith, and please, get used to my way of life." His eyelashes were long, like two tiny brushes casting faint shadows beneath his eyelids. At my words, those lashes trembled imperceptibly, yet his eyes remained closed. "As you wish." Satisfied with this answer, I straightened up and turned toward my king-size bed. My marriage with Lucian began with an utterly mysterious revolution. A city's most renowned metaphysical master analyzed my birth chart and declared that my fate carried the lonely phoenix curse. After turning 23, my romantic path would be fraught with obstacles, my family fortune would collapse, and all those close to me would face misfortune because of me. I, Nina, the sole heir of Aurora Global Group and a notorious playgirl in our circle, could disregard romantic misfortunes, but not the well-being of my parents. There is only one solution: to be with a man whose destiny bears the lotus mark for 1 year, allowing his purest and most masculine aura to balance the ominous energy in my fate. My father nearly exhausted all his connections and finally found this Buddhist monk with a lotus-shaped birthmark on his waist, Lucian, at the Lotus Temple in the suburbs. I still remember the first time I met him. It was a stormy afternoon, and he refused to see me. Discarding my usual arrogance, I took off my high heels and knelt all night on the stone slabs outside the prayer hall, dressed in a soaked Dior dress. The rain washed away the meticulously applied makeup on my face, as well as all my pretense and pride. Just as the stinging pain in my knees and the biting cold nearly made me faint, the door of the prayer hall creaked open. He stood holding an antiquated oil paper umbrella amidst the pouring rain. Dressed in plain white robes with spotless shoes, his striking eyebrows and eyes gave him an ethereal presence, as though he didn't belong to this mortal world. At that moment, the thunder and storm around us faded into insignificance, my entire world narrowed down to his deep, ancient well-like eyes. He looked at my disheveled state with no pity in his gaze, only a serene understanding that saw through everything. "Miss, the mortal world is fraught with peril. Are you certain you wish to drag me into your troubles?" I looked up at him, the rain blurring my vision, but I stubbornly nodded. "I have no other choice." After a moment of silence, he finally agreed to come down from the mountain on one condition: that my family would fund the construction of a sutra repository for the temple. And so, we registered our marriage. I picked up a printed document from the bed and walked over to him. "Lucian, sign this." He finally opened his eyes. What kind of eyes were those, bright and clear, sharp and devoid of any impurities, yet so deep they were unfathomable? When he looked at you, you felt as if all your thoughts were laid bare. He took the document. It was the agreement I had drafted. The terms were clearly listed. 1. Party A, Nina, shall be responsible for teaching Party B, Lucian, modern social living skills, including but not limited to smartphone usage, social media operation, and luxury brand identification. 2. Party B shall be responsible for presiding at home, providing Party A with 1 year of destiny balancing services through their personal aura. 3. During the term of the agreement, both parties shall reside in separate rooms and shall not interfere with each other's private lives. 4. Physical contact is prohibited unless absolutely necessary. His gaze lingered on the 4th clause for a second before he picked up the pen I had prepared. With deliberate strokes, he signed Lucian in the space designated for Party B's signature. His handwriting, much like the man himself, was lean yet forceful, graceful and full of strength. "All right." He handed the agreement back to me. I stored it away, feeling quite pleased, then turned and sprawled back onto my large bed, ready to embrace our mutually respectful married life. Post-marriage life indeed unfolded exactly as stipulated in the agreement, clear-cut and unequivocal. Lucian converted the study on the first floor into his meditation room, filling his days with sitting in contemplation, reading, and practicing calligraphy. His meals, prepared separately by the housekeeper, were strictly vegetarian. As for me, I remained the Nina who reveled night after night. The roar of my sports car shattering the quiet of the villa district, returning with the mingled scents of alcohol and perfume clinging to me, such was the norm of my existence. Every time I walk past his room in high heels, swaying my hips, I deliberately stop and knock on the door with a light tap. The door opens a crack, revealing that face of his, the kind that could topple kingdoms. "Lucian, how was your meditation today?" I jingled the car keys in my hand with a bright, carefree smile. "Want to try the special cocktail I just brought back from the bar?" He didn't even bother lifting his eyelids, his gaze fixed on the ground 3 inches from my feet, merely uttering a few indifferent words, "No need." Then, the door mercilessly closed in front of me. My best friend Tanya came to visit me at home and happened to witness this scene. She leaned against the staircase railing, clicking her tongue in amusement. "Nina, where did you find this living bodhisattva to worship at home?" She leaned in and whispered in my ear, "But I'd bet $100 that a man like him, who seems so detached and indifferent, would go absolutely wilder than anyone once he falls in love." I scoffed outwardly, but my mind couldn't help but paint a picture of Lucian overcome with passion. What kind of desire would color that aloof face? What kind of storm would surge in those calm, fathomless eyes? Just the thought of it felt a little thrilling. This thought, like a seed buried deep in the heart, only awaited the right moment to sprout. That moment soon came. One night, at a birthday party for a childhood friend, things got a bit out of hand. I had mixed all sorts of drinks, and by the time it ended, everything was spinning before my eyes. I could barely even walk straight. The driver dropped me off at my doorstep. I waved him off and stumbled inside, leaning against the wall for support. As I passed by his room, for some inexplicable reason, I stopped in my tracks. The door was slightly ajar, revealing a soft glow from within. I pushed it open and, emboldened by the alcohol, mistook the room for my own bedroom. The room was filled with the fragrant traces of sandalwood. Lucian had already gone to bed, lying on a simple wooden bed by the window. Moonlight filtered through the curtains, casting a soft glow over him. My mind was in a daze, my mouth parched, and my body weak. "What a fragrant sandalwood pillow," I murmured, stumbling toward the bed and sprawling over it like an octopus, arms and legs clinging tightly to him. The pillow beneath me stiffened abruptly. I felt a hand rest on my shoulder, as if trying to push me away, accompanied by a restrained yet exasperated voice, "Nina, don't talk." I buried my face into the warm crook of his neck, inhaling deeply the comforting scent of sandalwood, and grumbled in discontent, "Pillows aren't supposed to speak." He seemed to have given up struggling, yet his body remained as taut as a stone. Restlessly, I shifted, trying to find a more comfortable position. In the chaos, my hand slipped inside his loose silk robe and brushed against smooth, warm skin. This texture was somewhat peculiar. Emboldened by the alcohol, my curiosity flared, and my fingertips began tracing the skin. There seemed to be intricate patterns beneath it, unlike anything I'd felt before. Guided by sensation alone, I slowly traced the contours. Was it a flower? Just as my fingertip outlined the last petal, the man beneath me sharply inhaled, his body instantly tensing. A startling heat radiated from where our skin touched, spreading rapidly through his entire body. I could even hear the sound of his racing heartbeat, pounding against my eardrums like a drum. "Don't touch there." His voice was hoarse, tense, carrying a tremble I'd never heard before and, "Desire?" My muddled mind snapped halfway back to clarity. I froze, my hand still resting against his waist. That was where the fortune teller had said the lotus mark lay in his fate. A startling thought flashed through my mind like lightning: this lotus was his trigger. A single touch would ignite his passion. Ever since discovering that astonishing secret, I've felt like there's a kitten scratching at my heart, itching with curiosity. I've activated what I call the scientific research mode to explore the monk's inner world. Verbal teasing is no longer enough for me, I need more direct, clinical trials. Experiment 1, the morning corridor. I timed it just right when he would leave the meditation room for the dining hall. Wearing a floor-length dress and holding a cup of coffee, I walked toward him. At the moment we passed each other, I accidentally slipped, letting out a startled cry as my body tilted toward him. The instinct to survive made me reach out blindly, and my hand landed with uncanny precision on his waist. Through the thin fabric, my fingertips once again pressed against the center of that lotus. His body stiffened as expected. In an instant, he steadied me, his arm gripping me like an iron vice. Pressed against his chest, I could clearly feel his body temperature rising rapidly. "Nina, mind your step." His voice was taut as a fully drawn bowstring, his grip on me strong enough to nearly crush my arm. I looked up and met his bottomless eyes. No longer calm and still, they now churned with stormy waves. Though he fought to restrain it, I caught a flicker of panic flashing in them. The tips of his ears turned visibly red. "Thank you." I steadied myself, casually smoothing down my skirt, though the corners of my lips couldn't help but curl upward. "Are you feeling hot? Your face is all red." He quickly released me, taking a step back to widen the gap between us. Turning away, he left me with a cool and indifferent silhouette, his voice returning to its usual aloof tone. "The room is stuffy." "Is that so?" I trailed behind him, speaking lightly. "Then why do I feel like someone struggling with an unresolved flame?" Lucian, walking ahead of me, paused for a brief moment, the rhythm of his fingers counting the prayer beads around his wrist noticeably hastening. Experiment 2, books on the high shelf. I pretended to ask him to fetch a picture book for me from the top shelf. He didn't refuse and stepped onto the ladder. Wearing a loose linen shirt, the hem of his clothes lifted slightly as he reached out, revealing a glimpse of skin at his waist. I stood below, pretending to casually glance upward. I swear, I saw it. The lotus birthmark wasn't flat, it possessed a three-dimensional texture. Now its color appeared deeper than what I'd seen under moonlight that night, as if dipped in ink. The tightly closed bud exuded an icy aloofness that warned strangers to stay away. He came down holding the sketchbook, and I immediately handed him a glass of water. "You've worked hard." As he reached out to take the glass, my fingertips accidentally brushed against his waist. The hand holding the sketchbook trembled almost imperceptibly. I watched him down the entire glass of water, his Adam's apple bobbing, and for some reason, it struck me as oddly sensual. "Lucian," I tilted my head, feigning innocence as I asked, "is there some kind of tattoo on your waist?" His grip on the empty glass tightened slightly, and he fixed me with a heavy gaze before countering, "You seem quite interested in my body, don't you?" This was the first time he had spoken to me in such an aggressive tone. My heart skipped a beat, but I smiled even more brightly on the surface. After all, we're contractual partners. Isn't it normal to be concerned about each other's health? He ignored me and turned to enter the room. Amidst this back-and-forth probing, Lucian unexpectedly went viral online. It all started when a bored wealthy neighbor filmed a video of him reading by the lake in the garden and posted it on social media, captioning it, "My neighbor is a man so handsome he looks like he descended from heaven." In the video, he sat by the lotus pond in a white robe, the breeze gently ruffling his sleeves and hair. Behind him were the pavilions and towers of a traditional Chinese garden, a scene as serene as an ink painting. His cool, ascetic demeanor stood in stark contrast to the backdrop of a modern luxury mansion, instantly setting the internet ablaze. The comment section was utterly overrun. 3 minutes, I want all the information on this man. What? He has a wife? Mind having one more? Or maybe another one? I'll call him husband first, No one better steal him from me. With looks like that, I can't believe his wife would let him sleep alone. There's definitely more to this story. Overnight, the video amassed over 10 million likes. Netizens dubbed Lucian Acides most stoically handsome bachelor. Scrolling through my phone, I stared at the endless hubby comments and felt an inexplicable irritation for the first time. A feeling somewhat like the displeasure of having one's treasured collection coveted by countless others. I clicked on that wealthy lady's profile and pressed the report button without hesitation. Reason: violation of portrait rights. In my life, there was more than just Lucian. That day, I was invited to the opening cocktail party of an avant-garde art exhibition. Amid the crowd of well-dressed attendees, I spotted a familiar figure. Nina? A warm and gentle voice called out from behind me. Turning around, I saw Sebastian. He was my senior from university and now a somewhat renowned artist in the circle. Dressed in an elegant beige suit with gold-rimmed glasses, his smile was as pleasant as a spring breeze. Long time no see, senior. I raised my glass in greeting. Yes, we haven't met since graduation. His eyes were filled with undisguised admiration and affection. You're still as radiant as ever. Throughout the entire cocktail party, Sebastian stayed by my side, explaining the creative concepts behind each painting and thoughtfully shielding me from unwelcome advances. As the party came to an end, he walked me to the door and took out an exquisite velvet box from his pocket. This is for you, I designed it myself. The box contained an iris-shaped brooch with tiny sapphires embedded in its butterfly wings, shimmering radiantly under the light. It's too valuable, I instinctively wanted to refuse. It's not valuable, he insisted, pushing the box into my hand without hesitation, his gaze tender yet determined. To me, nothing compares to you. This straightforward confession left me somewhat flustered. By the time I got home, it was already past midnight. To my surprise, Lucian wasn't in his meditation room as usual but was sitting on the living room sofa. The living room was illuminated only by a floor lamp, its dim yellow light stretching his shadow long across the floor. On the coffee table before him sat a cup of honey water, still warm. This was the first time he had waited for me. A strange feeling stirred in my heart, making even the motion of changing shoes slow slightly. You're back, he spoke, his tone unreadable. Yeah. I walked over, picked up the cup of honey water, and took a sip. The sweetness was just right. His gaze landed on my chest. Only then did I remember that I had casually pinned the brooch Sebastian gave me onto the collar of my coat. His eyes lingered on the brooch for barely a second before drifting away, his voice still neutral. It's late. You should rest soon. With that, he stood up and retreated to his room. I keenly sensed something was off with his mood. The next day, I deliberately wore the same coat with the iris brooch pinned to it, parading around in front of him. During lunch, the nanny brought out the regular soup. Lucian picked up the ladle and, quite naturally, served me a bowl. I glanced down and froze. Floating in the soup were a few bright green scallions, yet not a trace of the cilantro I despised so much. I've never eaten cilantro since childhood, but I've never mentioned this to anyone, not even my parents. The nanny hasn't been with us for long, so she wouldn't know about this habit of mine. How did he know? I looked up at him, only to find him quietly sipping his own plain soup, as if that gesture earlier had been nothing more than a casual act. But I knew, it wasn't. This was a silent, exclusive kind of affection. My heart felt as though it had been gently brushed by a feather, tingling with a subtle, tender itch. In the afternoon, I was trimming the flower branches in the garden when I accidentally pricked my finger on a rose thorn. I went back to the living room to look for a bandage and found Lucian reading a book. Holding up my finger with beads of blood, I walked up to him, my tone unintentionally tinged with a hint of coquettishness. Lucian, I'm bleeding. He put down his book, glanced up at me, then stood and fetched cotton swabs, iodine, and a bandage from the first aid kit. He took my hand and gently tended to the wound. His fingertips were slightly cool, and when they brushed against my skin, they sent a faint shiver through me. I looked at his focused profile and, as if compelled by some ghostly whim, said, "The clothes I'm wearing today got a bit dusty. Can you pat them clean for me?" After tending to the wound, he raised his head, his gaze resting on the collar where my brooch was pinned. He stood up in silence and walked toward me. The scent of sandalwood enveloped me. The moment he drew near, I clearly sensed the tension in the muscles at his waist. I could even imagine that the lotus flower, at this very moment, must have curled up like a shy mimosa, its petals tightly closed, exuding an aura of icy detachment. Suddenly, my heart blossomed with joy. So, this lotus isn't just a switch, it's also a barometer. So, this living bodhisattva really does get jealous. Tanya's birthday party had booked out one of the city's most exclusive private clubs. By the time I arrived, the place was already bustling with lively conversations and clinking glasses. To my surprise, Sebastian was there too. "Nina, you're here." Tanya pulled me aside and gestured toward Sebastian. Sebastian heard it was my birthday and rushed over from his studio just for this. Sebastian raised his glass toward me with an elegant, warm smile. Midway through the party, Sebastian suggested showing everyone a rare type of spice he'd recently acquired from Southeast Asia. He produced an ancient-looking copper incense burner and lit a dark purple stick of incense. A faint, delicate fragrance with a subtle hint of sweetness quickly permeated the private room. "This is Dream Butterfly," Sebastian introduced. "It has calming and mood-enhancing effects, helping people to relax completely." No one paid it much attention and continued drinking and enjoying themselves. After a few drinks, I felt slightly tipsy. The scent seemed almost magical, gradually loosening my nerves and making my thoughts grow sluggish. At that moment, the lounge pianist began to play. Sebastian walked over to me and whispered, "Nina, let me play a piece for you." He exchanged a few words with the pianist before settling himself in front of the grand piano. His slender fingers danced across the black and white keys, conjuring a tender, lingering melody. "This piece is called Iris Butterfly. I wrote it for you." His voice carried clearly through the microphone, reaching everyone's ears. The entire room erupted in cheers. I sat on the sofa, feeling every gaze in the room fixed on me. While playing, Sebastian never took his affectionate eyes off me. In his gaze, there seemed to be a gentle whirlpool, threatening to draw me in completely. The scent of Dream Butterfly in the air grows increasingly stronger. My consciousness begins to blur. Dizzy and disoriented, the world seems to spin around me. Before my eyes, Sebastian's face gradually merges with Lucian's. I watch as Lucian finishes the final piece and walks toward me, gently helping me up. "Nina, you've had too much to drink. Let me take you home." His voice, too, transforms into Lucian's cool, magnetic tone. Weak and powerless, like a marionette, I let him lead me away from the noisy party. I want to take out my phone and send a message to the real Lucian, to tell him I'll be home soon. But my hands won't obey me, and I can't even grip my bag properly. In a daze, I saw the Lucian beside me take my handbag, retrieve my phone from it, and effortlessly turn it off. Then, he guided me into a car. As the car started, the neon lights outside the window rapidly receded, stretching into long streaks of light and shadow. My consciousness, like those fleeting lights, plunged into boundless darkness. At home. The wall clock's hour hand pointed straight to midnight. Lucian closed the scripture in his hand, his brow slightly furrowed. Normally, Nina would have returned by this time, no matter how wildly she'd been out enjoying herself. An unprecedented sense of unease, like creeping vines, wrapped around his heart, tightening relentlessly. He took out that smartphone he had never used before, the one Nina had forced him to accept, turned it on, and from the contacts, found the one pinned at the top, labeled Nina. For the first time, he took the initiative to call her. Yet what came from the receiver was the cold, mechanical voice of a woman. "The number you have dialed is currently switched off." Switched off? Lucian's eyes instantly turned cold. He remembered Nina had once installed a tracking app on his phone, saying it was to prevent this caveman from getting lost. At the time, he thought it was absurd, but now it had become his only lifeline. He opened that pink app, and the little red dot representing Nina on the map remained quietly stationary at the location of a 5-star hotel in the east of the city, unmoving for a long time. Without a moment's hesitation, Lucian grabbed the car keys belonging to Nina from the hallway and dashed out of the villa. The roar of the engine, like an enraged beast, shattered the silence of the deep night. Hotel, presidential suite. Sebastian placed the unconscious Nina on the large bed, his eyes gleaming with obsession and madness. As he bent down, his fingertips just inches away from touching her cheek. Boom! The suite door was violently kicked open from the outside. Lucian stood at the doorway, dressed in simple attire but radiating an icy aura of lethal intent. His gaze was as cold as Siberian frost, capable of freezing a person in an instant. Without a word, he strode forward swiftly. Under Sebastian's stunned gaze, a precise, vicious punch landed square on his face with overwhelming force. Sebastian fell to the ground with a thud, his gold-rimmed glasses knocked aside, the lenses shattered. Lucian didn't even glance at him. He quickly took off his own coat and wrapped it tightly around Nina, whose clothes were slightly disheveled on the bed. Every movement carried both suppressed anger and utmost tenderness. Then, he swept her up in his arms and held her close, as if she were a rare treasure he had lost and regained. Sebastian clutched his bleeding mouth, struggling to rise from the ground as he roared furiously, "How dare you? I've loved her for so many years. How dare you?" Lucian held Nina in his arms and walked to the door, only to pause mid-step. Without turning back, he left behind words icy enough to cut someone to the bone, "Because I am her husband." I woke up in the familiar, comforting scent of sandalwood. Opening my eyes, I saw the plain ceiling of Lucian's room. I lay on Lucian's simple wooden bed, covered by his blanket, which still carried the warmth and scent of his body. "Awake?" Lucian's voice came from beside me. I turned my head to see him sitting in a chair by the bed, holding a glass of water. I struggled to sit up, the lingering effects of alcohol and medication making my head pound fiercely. He reached out to support my back, bringing the glass to my lips. "Drink some water." I obediently took a few sips, my parched throat finding slight relief. Last night. My memory was still stuck on that hypnotic piano piece from the party. "You were drugged." Lucian's voice was calm, yet carried a hint of chill, a technique combining rare hallucinogenic spices with psychological suggestion. It's called sensory manipulation. A shudder ran through me as Sebastian's refined and gentle face flashed across my mind. "How could you know about these things?" I looked at him in disbelief. In him, I saw a side that was completely opposite to the ascetic monk persona. Lucian remained silent for a long time, so long that I thought he wouldn't answer. He lowered his gaze, his long eyelashes concealing all the emotions in his eyes. "Because my mother used similar methods to establish herself in that circle." This was the first time he had voluntarily revealed his background to me. His mother was the renowned Triple Crown actress Sophia, a household name. His father was Vincent, a once dominant business tycoon. And he was the illegitimate child born from this unsavory relationship. Back then, Sophia was at the peak of her career. To conceal this past, and because she believed a master who claimed his fate was unusual, that he carried too much hostility and needed to cultivate himself in a Buddhist temple to grow up safely, she sent him, still in swaddling clothes, to the Lotus Temple. Over the years, apart from sending generous incense money periodically, Sophia never acknowledged him as her son. He knew those underhanded methods because the master of Lotus Temple couldn't bear to see him remain isolated from the world and had privately enlightened him, teaching him to recognize the treacherous hearts of the secular world, both as part of his practice and for self-preservation. I listened quietly, feeling as if an invisible hand had gripped my heart, sending waves of piercing pain through it. I finally understood that his innate aloofness and detachment weren't by choice, but the result of more than 2 decades of passive exile. He wasn't an untouched Buddha, just a child, abandoned by the world. My eyes grew warm, tears slipping uncontrollably down my cheeks. I reached out and gently grasped his hand resting on his knee. His fingers were cold, the knuckles distinct. Feeling my touch, his body stiffened as instinct urged him to withdraw. But I only held on tighter. Lucian, I met his gaze, my voice hoarse from suppressed emotion. From now on, I won't let you face anything alone. He lifted his head, and for the first time, those aloof eyes reflected my image, clear and singular. Late into the silent night, I lay in bed devoid of sleep. Lucian had bandaged the wound on my hand, and now that small band-aid seemed like a brand, leaving behind traces of warmth where his fingers had touched. I stood up and approached his room door. It wasn't closed, and he was facing away from me, copying scriptures under the lamp. I walked in and gently wrapped my arms around his waist from behind. His body instantly stiffened. Lucian. I pressed my face against his broad back, feeling his steady heartbeat. Is something wrong? He didn't turn around, but his voice was tense. Thank you, for Sebastian. It's my duty. No, I shook my head, it's not the same. I told him that the master said Sebastian's actions had, by sheer coincidence, triggered yet also resolved the most perilous crisis of the lonely phoenix calamity in my fate. Our agreement, as of today, was effectively concluded ahead of time. His hand holding the pen froze. So, he said in a low voice, our agreement can end now. Yes, I tightened my arms, holding him closer, the agreement can end, but can we start over? I felt his breath catch. Bravely, I slid my hand under his clothes once more, resting it again on that mysterious lotus at his waist. This time, it wasn't just a curious exploration, it was a gamble, a gesture of deep regard. The skin there was astonishingly hot. You stepped into the mortal world for me, I whispered softly in his ear, tilting my head up. Now it's my turn to stay for you. Is that okay? As soon as my words fell, the lotus beneath my fingers seemed to heed some unseen call, blooming fervently with an intensity never witnessed before. I could clearly sense every petal unfurling with a desperate, all-or-nothing determination. Lucian's body shuddered violently, his eyes churning with turbulent waves I couldn't comprehend. He suddenly grabbed my wrist with such force that it felt like he was about to crush my bones. He turned around, his usually cool and detached eyes now blazing with uncontrollable fury. Nina, his voice was hoarse to the extreme, each word seeming to be squeezed from the depths of his throat, you don't know what you're saying. I know. I met his gaze and stubbornly repeated, I like you, Lucian. The fire in his eyes flickered for a moment, then gradually dimmed, returning to its lifeless stillness. Slowly, one by one, he pried open my fingers and pushed me away. His expression cooled once more, distant as if separated by mountains and rivers. How can someone abandoned at the temple gates, who doesn't even know their own roots, be worthy of standing beside a privileged daughter of heaven like you? His voice was soft, yet it struck like a blade, driving deep into my heart. I can't give you a future. The next day, he calmly placed a signed divorce agreement in front of me. Alongside it on the table was a lotus-shaped bookmark he had meticulously crafted from sandalwood. The carving was exquisite, the petals lifelike, still carrying the warmth of his fingertips. May you find peace in all the years to come. With those words, he turned and left, taking nothing with him except the small bag he had arrived with. His departing figure was resolute, without a trace of reluctance. As I gazed at the lotus bookmark, my tears finally overflowed. Lucian, you helped me cross my trials, only to become the hardest trial of my life. 3 years. Over 1,000 days and nights. Lucian vanished as if he had evaporated from the face of the earth, leaving no trace behind. I never stepped foot in a bar again, gave up all my bad habits, and locked away the sports car he once sat in, leaving it to gather dust in the garage. I cut my long hair short, swapped my outfits for sharp suits, and took over Aurora Global Group with a decisive, no-nonsense approach. I transformed from the wild, party-loving heiress everyone knew into Nina, the somewhat notorious beauty CEO of the business world. I grew stronger, yet lonelier. I kept the room he left behind exactly as it was. In my spare time I would sit on the meditation mat he once used, trying to read the Buddhist scriptures he had read and savor the light tea he had drunk. I tried to step into his world, to understand the pain behind his resolute departure. What I didn't know was that while I was striving to get closer to him, he was also rushing toward me from the other side of the world. In just 3 years, he completed dual degrees in finance and management overseas. With extraordinary talent and nearly masochistic effort, he carved out his own place in the turbulent empire of business. He learned to drink, to socialize, to navigate effortlessly through the clinking of glasses. He worked hard to transform himself from an ascetic outsider detached from worldly affairs into a worldly person who could stand shoulder to shoulder with me. 3 years later, late one night, as I finished processing a backlog of company documents and leaned back exhausted in my office chair, my phone vibrated with a new friend request. The applicant's account name is Lucian, with an ink wash landscape as the profile picture. My heart skipped a beat abruptly. With trembling fingers, I pressed accept. The other person didn't send any text, only a photo. The background of the photo seemed to be a hotel gym, captured from a low angle, showing well-defined 8-pack abs and a seductive Adonis belt. And on the left side of her waist, the lotus birthmark I knew so well was blooming wildly, each petal brimming with unrestrained vitality. My tears instantly welled up. I immediately replied, "Where?" The response came quickly, "Don't come yet. Finals. Busy." Just a few simple words, yet they gave me a glimpse into his life over these 3 years. We began to stay in touch sporadically. He never brought up relationships, only occasionally sharing snippets of his studies and daily life, a photo of the library, a case analysis covered in handwritten notes, or a late-night Americano to stay alert. On my birthday, I received a picture he sent me. It was a moving image of a blooming lotus, created with countless lines of code. The lotus bud slowly opened into full bloom, cycling over and over, breathtakingly beautiful. I stared at that image for a long time, then replied to him, "Here, the lotus has withered for 3 years." He didn't respond for a long time. It wasn't until the next morning that I finally received his message. Just one line. "Wait for me. I'll make it bloom for you again." On my 26th birthday, the company executives insisted on celebrating for me, booking out a top-tier jazz bar. Unable to refuse, I had no choice but to attend. The bar was dimly lit, with blues music lazily drifting through the air. Sitting in the booth, I absent-mindedly swirled the whiskey in my glass. Amid the noise, I suddenly sensed a familiar, intensely penetrating gaze fall upon me. My heart abruptly tightened. I sharply turned my head, following the sensation. In the farthest corner, shrouded in shadows, sat a man. He wore an exquisitely tailored black haute couture suit, with the top 2 buttons at the collar undone, revealing his alluring collarbone. A slender cigarette rested between his long fingers, the crimson ember flickering faintly in the dim light. Amidst the swirling smoke, his strikingly handsome face bore a newfound mature languor and a wild dominance over the scene, more so than 3 years ago. The once untouchable ascetic had transformed into the king of the night. It was Lucian. Our gazes met across the room. Separated by 3 years, by the clamoring crowd, yet we could seemingly hear the deafening echoes in each other's hearts. He slowly stubbed out the cigarette in a crystal ashtray. Then he stood up and walked toward me, step by step. Every footstep felt as though it landed directly on my heart. The clamor of the entire bar seemed to fade into a silent backdrop. In my world, there was only his figure drawing closer and closer. He stopped before me, looking down with those profound eyes that swirled with emotions I knew all too well, only more intense than ever before. Leaning slightly, his voice lowered to a husky rasp from years of tobacco, whispering in my ear, "I'm back, Nina." I couldn't hold back any longer. Springing to my feet, I threw myself into the arms I'd longed for so dearly. There's a faint scent of tobacco about him, mingled with the crisp woody notes of high-end cologne, and that trace of sandalwood I know so well, hidden in the deepest layer. This is his scent, his unique presence. Lucian holds me tightly, as if wanting to meld me into his very bones and blood. The next second, he cradles the back of my head and descends into a deep kiss. This kiss is no longer tentative, no longer restrained. It carries 3 years of longing, repressed madness, and the ecstasy of something lost and found again, sweeping over all my senses with a dominance both fierce and tender. The surrounding colleagues and guests erupted in surprised exclamations and whistles. But I couldn't hear anything, couldn't see anything. In my world, there was only him. At this moment, words were unnecessary. All the waiting and suffering found fulfillment in this kiss. Lucian took me to a mountaintop villa overlooking the city's night view. This was the home he had prepared for me. Standing before the massive floor-to-ceiling windows, the dazzling city lights unfolded beneath our feet like a river of stars. He wrapped his arms around me from behind, resting his chin in the hollow of my shoulder, his warm breath brushing against my neck. "Do you like it?" "I do." I turned around to face him. He told me that after leaving 3 years ago, he was found by an assistant of his biological father, Vincent. On his deathbed, Vincent finally acknowledged him as his son and entrusted him with his vast business empire. But he didn't accept it immediately. He chose a harder path. He wanted to stand tall on his own, reaching a height worthy of matching me. I didn't come back as someone's illegitimate child. He took my hand, looking at me with intense eyes, but as Lucian, the head of Echelon Enterprises. Now, I'm no longer empty-handed. He suddenly knelt on one knee and took out a velvet box from his pocket. The box opened, revealing a pink diamond ring inspired by the lotus flower. The centerpiece was a rare pigeon blood red diamond, surrounded by smaller diamonds that outlined the blooming form of a lotus. Under the light, it was breathtakingly beautiful. I once had nothing, too afraid to promise you a future. Now, I offer the world I built with my own hands, in exchange for the privilege to stand by your side forever. His gaze was as devout as a believer's. "Nina, marry me." Tears once again betrayed me and streamed down my face. Nodding through the tears, I extended my hand. He slipped the ring onto my finger, a perfect fit. My hand trailed to his waist, where even through the expensive fabric of his suit, I could feel the burning heat. Rising onto my tiptoes, I whispered playfully into his ear, "So, will this switch still be under my control from now on?" Lucian grasped my hand and brought it to his lips, pressing a scorching kiss against it. His voice was deep and mesmerizing, laced with lethal allure. "It's not a switch, it's my heart. From the moment I first saw you, it has only beaten for you." My wedding with Lucian shocked the entire city. At the wedding, the famous actress Sophia also came. She held my hand, with reddened eyes, constantly thanking me for bringing Lucian back to the mortal world. I just smiled faintly, discreetly pushing back the heirloom bracelet she handed me. "Auntie, you should save this for your other future daughter-in-law." I used this way to tell her that Lucian now has his own family, a brand new one, completely disconnected from the past. On our wedding night, slightly tipsy, I lay in the bathtub and once again accidentally touched that lotus-shaped birthmark. Lucian lifted me out of the water, wrapped me in a towel, and kissed me all the way back to the bedroom. He laid me on the soft bed, leaned down, and whispered in my ear, his voice sinfully alluring, "Stop trying, wifey. Tonight, it blooms all night, just for you." 3 years later. At the joint charity gala hosted by Lucian's company and mine, I stood with my 6-month baby Bump, holding Lucian's arm as we received everyone's blessings. On the first birthday of our twin babies, our son grabbed a strand of sandalwood prayer beads, while our daughter reached for a tiny gilded wine cup. My father held his grandson with mixed emotions. "My dear grandson, don't follow in your father's footsteps. Our family has a grand legacy, becoming a monk is out of the question." My mother held her granddaughter with a worried expression. "My dear granddaughter, don't follow in your mother's footsteps when she was young. Drinking harms your health, let's be a good baby." Lucian and I exchanged a knowing smile. Who said Buddhists can't inherit family fortunes? Who claimed that drinking enthusiasts can't be life's winners? He descended into the mundane world for me, and I shed all pretenses for him. We each found fulfillment in our own paths, ultimately discovering the most secure haven in each other's lives. In a quiet corner of the banquet, I spotted a familiar figure. It was Sebastian. After undergoing the most advanced treatment abroad, his eyes regained most of their vision. He transitioned entirely behind the scenes, and last year, an art film he directed titled Light and Dust won an international award. In his acceptance speech, he said, "Thank you to the light in my life that once made me lose my way but ultimately helped me find myself. Now, I strive to become my own light." I withdrew my gaze and placed my hand over Lucian's. He clasped it in return, our fingers interlocking. "There is a long future ahead of us, we will be the light that illuminates each other and shines upon many others."